Rain battered the diner's grimy window. Sabrina watched it blur the neon Open 24 HRS sign into a smeared red, matching the throb in her temple. In the glass, she was a ghost. Pale, hollow-eyed, dark hair plastered to her skull. The oversized men's sweater, his, smelled like stale cologne and control. It was all she'd grabbed. 3 blocks. That's how far she'd run in the freezing rain, in socks, after slipping out the bathroom window of the apartment they shared. Correction, the apartment he let her stay in. Her phone, keys, purse, still there on the kitchen counter, probably being watched. He tracked her phone. Always. He'd made it clear. For your safety, baby. This city's full of monsters. The irony tasted bitter. She'd sat in the cracked vinyl booth for 47 minutes, nursing a single coffee she couldn't afford. Darla, the tired-eyed waitress, refilled it twice, eyes lingering on the faint bruise above Sabrina's collar. No questions, just coffee. Survival here was its own language, spoken in silence and averted eyes. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She clamped them between her knees, but the tremors ran up her arms, a live wire of adrenaline and terror. He'd wake soon. He'd find her gone. He'd check the phone's location, see it still at the apartment, and then the hunt would start. An hour, maybe 2, before his calm rage set the city turning. She needed a real plan, not just running, but vanishing. She had to reach her sister in Oakwood, 3 states away, but that required a bus ticket and money. Her eyes landed on the payphone by the restrooms. Her mother's number was one she still knew by heart, but calling would be risky. He monitored family lines. He'd hinted as much, threats disguised as concern. Sabrina's gaze swept the near-empty diner. She registered an old man dozing over a newspaper, a truck driver shoveling pie at the counter. In a corner booth, her eyes lingered on a man sitting alone. He was out of place. His midnight suit, fine wool, absorbed the diner's dull light. He didn't eat, just sipped from a white mug, eyes on the rain-streaked window. Yet Sabrina sensed he noticed everything. The coffee machine drip, the trucker's fork on the plate, her racing heart. His severe profile was all sharp angles, stillness, like a sheathed blade. A dangerous, desperate idea formed in her mind. Insane. Reckless. The kind of move you make when every other door is locked from the outside. The trucker got up. He tossed bills on the counter and trudged out into the storm. The old man snored softly. It was now or never. Sabrina stood, legs wobbling. She passed the man's booth, her damp socks making soft, pitiful sounds on the linoleum. At the payphone, she lifted the receiver. The dial tone buzzed in her ear. She didn't put in coins, just stood there, receiver pressed to her ear, faking a call while watching the man in the suit from the corner of her eye. He hadn't budged. She let the receiver drop. Its clatter was loud in the quiet diner. She turned, took 3 shaky breaths, and walked to his booth. He looked up. His eyes were the most unsettling gray, like winter fog over a deep lake, unreadable and cold. Up close, he seemed younger, mid-30s, but his gaze carried an old weight and a stillness that spoke of seeing too much. "Excuse me," she said, her voice a ragged whisper. She cleared her throat, forcing strength into it. "I'm sorry to bother you. I'm in a situation. My phone is compromised. May I use yours? Just for one call. I promise it will be quick." She braced for rejection, suspicion, for him to see right through her, a scared rabbit in borrowed clothes, dripping on his pristine floor. He didn't speak. He studied her, his gaze moving from her waterlogged socks to her bruised throat, pausing on the tremor in her hands. His face revealed nothing, no pity, annoyance, or curiosity. It was a blank slate. Then, without breaking eye contact, he reached into his inner suit jacket pocket and pulled out a phone. It was sleek, black, and unobtrusive. He placed it on the table between them, slow and deliberate. "Thank you," Sabrina breathed, fingers darting to snatch it. "Thank you so—" His hand covered hers, not rough but unwavering. His skin was warm, his grip firm. A jolt, part fear, part something else, shot up her arm. "The rules," he said. His voice was low and calm, with a faint melodic accent. Maybe Sicilian. It was a voice used to being obeyed. You make your call here, where I can see you. You don't walk away with it. You don't enter a number I can't see. Understood? She nodded, her throat tight. Understood. He released her hand. She picked up the phone. It was warm from his pocket, heavier than it looked. Her mind raced. She couldn't call her sister. She couldn't call anyone he might know. She needed a number that was safe, untraceable to her. The only one that came to mind was the crisis hotline she'd memorized but never dared call, always afraid he'd see it on a bill. His gray eyes fixed on her, she dialed. The phone rang once, twice, her heart pounded. A professional, gentle voice answered. Crisis and support line, this is Maya. How can I help you tonight? Sabrina's rehearsed words vanished. All she managed was a choked, I need help. I got out. He doesn't know yet. I'm at the Galaxy Diner, 8th and Mercer. No money, no phone. Please. Okay, sweetheart, okay. You're safe right now? Are you in immediate danger? Not right this second. But he'll come. He always finds me. We can send a car, a safe place. Just stay where you are. Can you do that? Sabrina's eyes flicked to the watching man. He leaned back, gaze shifting to the window, feigning privacy. But she knew he listened to every word. Yes, I'll stay. Good. I'm dispatching a team now. They'll be there in 20 minutes. Ask for Clara. That's the code, okay? Clara. Clara, Sabrina repeated, a fragile hope blooming in her chest. Okay. She ended the call, her fingers numb. She placed the phone back on the table and slid it toward him. Thank you, she said again, the words more genuine this time. They're sending help. He picked up the phone, movements precise. He didn't put it away. His thumb moved quickly over the screen. Was he checking the call log, duration? Then he did something that turned her hope to ice. He opened a different app, a map. A blinking dot appeared, their apartment building. He examined her phone's location history, left behind. How could he possibly? Terror clawed at her chest, breath shallow, pulse wild. He zoomed in, his expression unchanged. He could see every place she'd been for the last week, month, year. The coffee shop she'd visited with a coworker, he'd later forced her to quit. The park she'd walked through when she needed to breathe. The women's clinic she'd gone to last month after a fall down the stairs. He saw it all. Her entire life of monitored, controlled movement lay bare on his screen. He frowned slightly, zoomed in on the dot, and checked the timestamp. His gaze moved from the screen to her wet socks, to her empty hands, to the desperate miles between the dot and the diner. He went utterly still. The silence around them deepened. It is charged with a new electric understanding. He knew she'd run without her phone. Tracking was useless. She'd outsmarted it by leaving it behind. Slowly, he powered off the phone and pocketed it. His eyes held hers, showing the first emotion since she'd approached. A cold, calculating respect. 20 minutes is a long time to wait, he said, his voice even quieter than before. In a place like this, with windows on all sides, Sabrina's blood ran cold. He wasn't just stating a fact. He was giving an assessment. A warning. Before she could respond, the bell over the diner door jangled. A man walked in, shaking rain off a leather jacket. He was big, with a bulldog neck and hands that looked like they could crack walnuts. His small, sharp eyes scanned the room and landed directly on her. It was Leo, her boyfriend's, no, her captor's, most loyal enforcer. He'd found her, already. Leo's mouth split into a serious, humorless grin. There you are, Sabrina. Nathan's worried sick. Time to come home. Panic, sharp and metallic, flooded Sabrina's mouth. Her instincts screamed at her to run, but her legs felt frozen, fused to the linoleum. The diner, which had felt like a fragile sanctuary moments before, now felt like a glass cage. The old man at the counter woke suddenly, sensing the danger in the air, and wisely buried his face back in his newspaper. Darla, the waitress, froze behind the counter, a coffee pot suspended mid-air. Leo took a step forward, his work boots leaving wet prints. Don't make this difficult, sweetheart. You know how he gets when he's upset. Sabrina's eyes darted toward the door and the kitchen exit behind the counter. But Leo was already moving to block the most obvious escape routes. He was methodical, practiced. This wasn't his first retrieval. Her eyes flicked almost against her will, to the man in the suit. Ricardo. She didn't know his name, but now she did. He hadn't moved a muscle. He sat with his back to the wall, watching the scene as if it were a mildly interesting play. His hands rested on the table, relaxed. He took a slow, final sip of his coffee, his gray eyes never leaving Leo. A desperate, crazy gamble solidified in her mind. It was born of sheer survivalist terror. She turned her body slightly, positioning herself closer to Ricardo's booth, a silent, pathetic attempt to align. She wasn't his. He owed her nothing. But in the animal language of predators and prey, she was trying to borrow his shadow. Leo noticed the shift. His small eyes narrowed, moving from Sabrina to the man in the expensive suit. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his blunt features. He was a thug, but he wasn't stupid. He recognized money and power when he saw them, even if he couldn't define their source.
"This is a private matter, pal," Leo said, his voice losing some of its swagger.
"The lady's coming with me." Ricardo finally moved. He placed his mug down with a soft click. He didn't look at Leo. He looked at Sabrina. "Is this man bothering you?" His tone was conversational, as if asking about the weather. The question hung in the air, a line thrown across a chasm. To grab it was to pull him irrevocably into her chaos. It was to lie, because this wasn't a random botherance. It was the epicenter of her nightmare. But survival trumped truth. She found her voice thin but steady. "Yes, I don't know him. I'm not going with him." It was the bravest, most terrifying lie she'd ever told. Leo's face reddened. "Bullshit. Listen, you—" He lunged for her arm. That's when Ricardo stood up. He rose from the booth with unhurried, fluid grace, more intimidating than a sudden lurch. Not as bulky as Leo, but taller. His stillness was a force. He didn't step between them, just stood, adjusted his cuff, and turned his cold gaze on Leo. The tension spiked. Ricardo's accent iced over. "You heard her. She's not interested. Leave, now." Leo puffed out his chest, but it was a hollow gesture. He was used to intimidating scared women and cowed shopkeepers, not men who looked at him as if he were a stain on the floor. "Who the fuck do you think you are? This is Nathan Sykes's business. You know that name? You don't want that trouble." At Nathan's name, Ricardo's eyes changed, not fear, but recognition, and something colder. Contempt. "Nathan Sykes?" he echoed, tasting the name. "He runs girls and collects from dying laundromats. He's a gnat." Ricardo took one step forward. Leo took one step back. "Tell Nathan she's under new protection. If he objects, he knows where to complain. But I doubt he will. Gnats don't challenge hurricanes." The threat was so soft, so reasonable, Leo needed a second to understand its lethality. His bravado faded, caution took over. He looked from Ricardo to Sabrina, jaw working. He did the math, and it wasn't in his favor. "This ain't over," Leo muttered, his tone empty. He pointed a thick finger at Sabrina. "He's gonna be furious." But he was already backing toward the door, never turning his back on Ricardo until the last instant. The bell jangled, and he vanished into the rain and night. The tension clung to the diner. It thickened, settling around the two left standing. Sabrina trembled violently, the aftermath hitting her like a wave. She hugged herself, feeling Nathan's hated, rough wool sweater. Ricardo turned his gaze back to her. The coldness was still there, but it was tempered now with a piercing assessment. 20 minutes, he said again, nodding toward the window. "The Clara vehicle, it is not coming." "What?" The word was a gasp. The moment that man walked in and spoke your real name, any secure protocol was compromised. If they were legitimate, they would abort. Your location is known. He stated it as a simple fact. Nathan Sykes may be a gnat, but he is a persistent one with other gnats at his disposal. They will be circling. The fragile hope of the crisis hotline, the promise of Clara, was shattered. She was adrift again, but now she had drawn the attention of a hurricane. She looked at Ricardo, this stranger who had just declared her under his protection for reasons she couldn't begin to fathom. "Why?" she whispered. "Why did you do that?" He didn't answer directly. Instead, Ricardo slid his hand into his pocket, produced a money clip, and removed several large bills. He set the bills on the table in front of Sabrina, placing far more than the cost of 2 coffees as compensation for their disturbance. "Come with me," he said, his tone leaving no room for refusal. Every instinct honed by years with Nathan screamed danger. Walking out with a stranger who operated in darker shadows than Nathan was insanity. But waiting meant Leo might return with reinforcements, or Nathan himself, his rage personified. Ricardo saw the war in her eyes. "You have approximately 8 minutes before the diner is no longer a neutral space," he said, his voice dropping, becoming almost confidential. "You can use those minutes to decide if I am the greater threat or if the known devil at the door is. But decide quickly." Ricardo moved past her without hesitation, confident in his choice, not pausing to check if she followed. His assured stride suggested he expected her to come, certain that he understood her priorities for survival. Sabrina froze for 3 precious minutes. Darla watched her, pity and warning in tired eyes. She saw herself reflected, a drowned rat in a monster's sweater. She thought of Nathan's hands, his voice, the bedroom's lock. She moved. She followed Ricardo Farina out of the Galaxy Diner and into the storm that raged outside. At the curb, a sleek black sedan waited, its tinted windows hiding the interior. As Ricardo drew near, the rear door opened from within. He held it open, inviting her wordlessly into the car's dark interior. She drew in a breath that felt final, then ducked inside the waiting car. The car was silent, warm, scented with fine leather. Ricardo slid in beside her, closed the door, and the car pulled away. The partition was up. They were cocooned. Sabrina pressed herself against the far door, putting as much space between them as possible. She watched the rain distort the passing streetlights, the familiar grimy landmarks of her prison neighborhood sliding by. They were heading east, toward parts of the city she had never seen, where the buildings grew taller and the lights cleaner. "Where are you taking me?" Her voice sounded small in the quiet. "Somewhere you cannot be found," he said, his eyes on his own window. He had taken out his phone again and was typing a rapid message. "You looked at my location history on my phone. How?" "A simple tracer linked to the number you called," he said, not looking up. "When you dialed out, it pinged the device. Basic counter-surveillance. Your phone was stationary while you stood before me. That told the real story, a story I find interesting." "Interesting," she echoed, the word bitter. "It shows forethought, resourcefulness, a willingness to burn bridges to cross a river. These are rare qualities." He finally put his phone away and looked at her. The interior lighting softened the harsh angles of his face, but made his eyes seem even more piercing. "What is your name?" "Sabrina." She saw no point in lying now. "Sabrina," he repeated. The way he said it, with his accent, gave it a weight, a formality it never had. "I am Ricardo Farina." The name meant nothing, but the way he spoke it, with quiet certainty, sent a new shiver down her spine. "Thank you, Mr. Farina, for back there." "Ricardo," he corrected her, "and do not thank me yet. Intervening was one thing. What comes next is another. Nathan Sykes will not let this stand. He cannot. His reputation, such as it is, depends on controlling what he believes is his. You have made him look weak in front of his men. He will react. So what happens now?" The question was laced with exhaustion. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving her hollow and shaking. "Now," he said, his gaze drifting back to the window as the city lights began to blur into wealth and opulence. "You disappear, and we see what the gnat does when his buzzing is ignored." The car entered a different world. Brick and neon gave way to steel, glass towers, and old-growth trees lit tastefully. They passed ornate iron gates and ascended a winding driveway bordered by manicured hedges. The house, no, palazzo, was a masterpiece of modern architecture fused with old-world grandeur. Stone, glass, and timber blended, sharp lines softened by ivy and lanterns. A fortress disguised as a home. The car stopped under a stone portico. Ricardo immediately stepped out and circled to Sabrina's side, holding the door open for her. As she stepped out, her damp socks soaked into a plush, rain-absorbent mat. At the entrance, a man in a dark suit, older, with a stern but not unkind face, stood waiting at the large double doors. "Sir," he greeted Ricardo, then quickly assessed Sabrina with a professional, unsurprised glance. "Aldo," Ricardo acknowledged. "We have a guest. She will be staying in the South Suite. See that she has everything she needs. Clothing, toiletries, a hot meal." Of course, sir. Aldo's gaze softened minutely as he took in Sabrina's bedraggled state. This way, miss. Sabrina hesitated, glancing at Ricardo. He was already turning away, checking his phone, moving on. She was a problem housed for now, a stray brought in from the rain. Wait, she said before she could stop herself. He paused, looked back, one eyebrow slightly raised. Why am I here? The question was deeper than logistics. It was motive, the debt growing each second she spent under his roof. You don't know me. This is immense. What do you want? Ricardo regarded her for a long moment, the soft light from the entrance hall casting shadows across his face. What I want, he said slowly, is to understand why a woman with the sense to leave her tracker behind was desperate enough to approach a stranger in a diner. The story interests me. As for the rest? He gestured slightly with his phone. Consider it an experiment, a temporary solution to a pressing problem. Aldo will take care of you. With that, he vanished, striding down a corridor lined with modern art that likely cost more than Nathan's entire operation. Aldo cleared his throat gently. The South Suite, miss, if you'll follow me. He led her through an entryway of marble and dark wood and up a floating staircase. Their footsteps were swallowed by a thick, silken rug in the hallway. The South Suite was not a room. It was an apartment. A sitting area with a fireplace, gas, lit with a remote, she'd later learn, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a rain-soaked walled garden, a bedroom with a bed that seemed to float on a platform, and a bathroom with a sunken tub and a shower big enough for 4. On the bed lay a set of clothes, soft gray leggings, a cashmere sweater, simple underwear, all in her size. The tags were still on. Dinner will be brought up in 30 minutes, Aldo said from the doorway. The intercom connects directly to the kitchen. Please rest. You are safe here. He said it with such conviction that Sabrina almost believed him. He left, closing the door with a quiet, solid click. Alone, the enormity of it crashed over her. The quiet was profound, broken only by the distant sigh of wind and rain against the glass. It was the inverse of Nathan's apartment, always filled with the low hum of his aggression, the threat of violence. Here, silence pressed in, heavy and watchful. She peeled off the damp, hated sweater and socks, leaving them in a heap on the pristine floor. It was a small act of rebellion. The shower was a baptism of steaming water and expensive, sandalwood-scented products. She scrubbed until her skin was pink, trying to wash away the feeling of Nathan's gaze, Leo's grip, the cold diner booth. Wrapped in a towel softer than any she'd touched, she pulled on the new clothes. The cashmere felt like a whisper against her skin, a shocking kindness that made her eyes prickle. A discreet knock announced dinner. A young woman, not much older than Sabrina, wheeled in a cart with a covered silver dish, a carafe of water, and a pot of tea. She offered a shy smile, set the food on a small table by the window, and left without a word. Sabrina ate roasted chicken with herbs, delicate potatoes, and crisp green beans. It was the best food she'd tasted in years. She ate every bite, the simple act of nourishment feeling like a reclamation. As she sipped the herbal tea, she stared out at the storm-lashed garden. Safe. Aldo had said it. But safety, she had learned, was always conditional, always borrowed. Her mind raced. Ricardo Farina. She had nothing, no leverage, no value to him. He was a man who lived behind gates and commanded instant obedience. To someone like him, Nathan Sykes was an insect. Men like that did not act out of charity. Her story interested him. That was a flimsy thread on which to hang such extravagant protection. Was it a whim? A power play against a rival, even a minor one? Or something else? A chill, unrelated to the rain, crept up her spine. She had jumped from the frying pan of known, familiar abuse into a fire of unknown, unimaginable scale. Ricardo's calm, analytical demeanor was more terrifying than Nathan's explosive rage. One was a storm you saw coming. The other was a deep, still ocean able to swallow you whole without a ripple. Finishing her tea, she paced the suite. It was a gilded cage, but a cage nonetheless. The windows didn't open. The door was unlocked when she tried it. But the hallway beyond was empty and silent. It led only to the grand staircase or other closed doors. She was a guest, but also a prisoner of circumstance and her own desperate choices. She found a notepad and a pen by the telephone. Instinct took over. She began to write, her hand moving swiftly. Everything she knew about Nathan's operation. The names she'd overheard, Leo, Marcus the bookkeeper, the strip club he used as a front, the shipping yard where dubious cargo moved at night, the cop he paid off. It was all fragmentary, gleaned from whispered calls and her own enforced invisibility, but it was something, a piece of paper that might be a tiny shield or a terrible liability. She folded it small and tucked it into the waistband of the leggings. Information was the only currency she had. A soft chime sounded from a panel by the door. A light blinked green. Cautiously, she pressed it. "Sabrina?" It was Ricardo's voice, filtered through a speaker, cool and clear. "Are you comfortable?" His voice invading her haven was jarring. He was watching, or at least monitoring. "Of course. Yes, thank you." "Good. Sleep. In the morning, we will talk." The connection ended. Sleep felt impossible. She lay in an impossibly soft bed in a dark, silent room and just listened. The house is settling. The distant, muted sound of a car engine somewhere on the grounds. The frantic rhythm of her own thoughts. Downstairs, in a study lined with books and illuminated by a single brass desk lamp, Ricardo Farina was not sleeping either. He sat before a bank of monitors, one showing a silent feed of the gated entrance, the other a thermal map of the house's perimeter. On his laptop, a file was open. A photo of Sabrina taken from a DMV database. Her history was sparse, bleak. A low-income childhood, a scholarship to a middling college left unfinished, a series of dead-end jobs, and then Nathan Sykes, a black hole of 3 years. Next to it was a file on Nathan Sykes. It was thicker, but only because it cataloged a long history of petty violence, failed schemes, and small-time depravity. A bully, not a strategist. A nuisance. Aldo entered, carrying a small silver tray with a glass of Amaro. "The young woman is settled, sir." Ricardo didn't look up from the screens. Her emotional state? Quiet, thoughtful. She ate everything. She is assessing. Aldo had a gift for concise summation. She wrote something after dinner. On the notepad. She hid it. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Ricardo's lips. Of course she did. He took the glass, swirled the dark liquid. "The Sykes situation? He is making noise. Calling his contacts, trying to find out who intervened. He is angry but also confused. He does not have the vision to see beyond his own rage, yet. Confusion is good. It makes him clumsy." Ricardo sipped his drink, his eyes on the thermal display. A small, warm blob of light was stationary in the south suite. "Sabrina, awake in the dark. Increase perimeter patrols. Discreetly. I want to know the moment any of Sykes's. Not so much as look at the gate. Understood." Aldo turned to leave, then paused. "Sir, if I may, why her? We have no business with Sykes." Ricardo was silent for a long moment, watching the stationary light on the screen. He thought of her in the diner, shaking but standing straight. The calculated risk of leaving the phone. The sheer brutal courage in those eyes when she lied to Leo, tying her fate to a stranger's. She burned her own lifeboat to get away from a leaky rowboat. Ricardo spoke quietly, more to himself than to Aldo. He paused. "That is not desperation. That is a particular kind of strength, a decisive one." He looked up, his gray eyes reflecting the monitor's glow. And the world is full of Nathan Sixes. It is refreshing to see one fail. Sabrina didn't remember falling asleep. She awoke with a start to pale gold sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. For one disorienting second, she didn't know where she was. The silence was absolute. The bed was an island of cloud-like softness. Then it all rushed back. The diner, the rain, Leo's brutish face, Ricardo's winter-gray eyes, this silent, opulent fortress. She sat up, heart thumping hard. The notepad was gone. Instantly, dread surged. Of course they'd come while she slept, invaded her space, uncovered her pathetic secret. Ricardo was likely reading it now. She felt dangerously exposed, irrational for trusting even fleeting safety. A knock at the door, softer than last night's. "Miss Sabrina? Breakfast is ready when you are. Would you prefer it in your room or in the morning room?" It was Aldo's voice. She cleared her throat. I'll come down." "Very good. Turn left at the bottom of the stairs, the second door on the right." After another shower, a luxury she couldn't resist, She dressed in another set of clothes that had magically appeared. These were a simple pair of dark trousers and a cream-colored silk blouse. They fit perfectly. The intimacy of it, this stranger providing for her so completely, was unsettling. She made her way downstairs, her bare feet silent on the cool stone and warm rugs. The morning room was bright, sun-drenched, overlooking the same walled garden, now sparkling and serene after the storm. A table was set for one with a silver pot of coffee, a bowl of berries, yogurt, and pastries that looked like they belonged in a Parisian patisserie. Ricardo was not there. Aldo appeared as she sat down. Mr. Farina is occupied with business. He asked that you join him in his study at 10 o'clock. He poured her coffee without asking. Is there anything else you require? Sabrina shook her head, feeling like an imposter. No, thank you. She ate slowly, her mind racing. The meeting is at 10. What would he want? To hear her story? To assess her usefulness? To present a bill for his services? She finished her coffee, the rich brew doing little to steady her nerves. With an hour to kill, she wandered to the French doors leading to the garden. They were locked, controlled by a keypad. The garden is accessible, miss, Aldo said, materializing again. He entered a code and the door clicked open. Please stay within the walls, for your safety. The garden was a masterpiece of order and beauty. Geometric hedges. A fountain murmured softly. Roses climbed trellises. The air was fresh and cool. She walked along a gravel path. Stones crunched softly under the borrowed slippers she'd found by her bed. The high walls, covered in ivy, felt less like protection and more like the boundaries of a very beautiful prison. She was safe from Nathan here. But from what else? At precisely 10 o'clock, Aldo escorted her to Ricardo's study. It was a different world from the sunlit morning room, a room of dark wood, deep leather, and the scent of old paper and polish. Ricardo sat behind a massive desk, not working, but waiting. He wore another impeccable suit, this one charcoal, and watched her as she entered. Sabrina, please sit. He gestured to a chair opposite the desk. She sat, folding her hands in her lap to hide their tremor. He didn't speak immediately, just studied her with that unnerving, analytical calm. On the desk between them lay the notepad from her room. Her folded note placed squarely on top. You slept well? He asked finally. Yes. Good. He picked up the folded paper and held it between two fingers. You are a careful woman. Or a scared one trying to be careful. This list, it is what you know of Nathan Sykes's operations. It wasn't a question. She nodded. It is incomplete, fragmentary, but it shows a good memory, and an eye for detail. He put the paper down. Why write it down? Did you think you might need to bargain with it? She met his gaze, forcing herself to hold it. I thought I might need to remember it, clearly, in case things changed. A flicker of approval in his eyes. A sensible precaution. Tell me, Sabrina, from the beginning, how does a woman with a mind that notices details end up property of a man like Nathan Sykes? The question was a scalpel, precise and cold. It laid bare her shame, her mistakes. But something in his tone, the lack of judgment, the pure clinical interest made it possible to answer. She found herself talking. She told him about meeting Nathan at a low-rent bar where she was waitressing, about the initial charm that felt like a rescue from a lonely, grinding life, how the control seeped in slowly, criticisms of her friends, then isolation from them, monitoring her phone, her spending her time, the escalating verbal tirades, the first shove that was an accident, the systematic dismantling of her will. She spoke of the fear that became a constant hum, like bad wiring in the walls. She told him about the final weeks, the locked doors, the GPS tracker on her phone disguised as a family location app, the certainty that if she didn't get out, she would either break completely or not survive the next accident. She did not cry. Her voice stayed flat, factual, almost clinical. As she finally spoke the whole story aloud, it sounded even bleaker in her own ears, even more humiliating. Was she always this naive? Or was this how control worked on people like her? Ricardo listened without interruption, his expression unchanging. When she finished, he was silent for a full minute. He targeted you because you were alone, he said finally. No strong family ties, financially vulnerable, intelligent enough to be useful, but isolated enough to be controlled. A classic predator's calculus. He leaned forward slightly. And you left the phone. That was the key. It was the one thing he believed tethered you. By abandoning it, you severed his illusion of control. That is why he is so enraged. It was not just an escape. It was a direct challenge to his competence. Ricardo's analytical perspective jarred her. But also, strangely, she felt seen. Was this how he weighed everything? Mechanics, not just mess. For the first time, the chaos of her life seemed to have a logic. What happens now, Ricardo? She asked, using his name for the first time. I can't stay here forever.
And he won't stop.
Correct on both counts. He steepled his fingers. You have two options. The first is the conventional one. I can have you relocated through channels that Sykes cannot penetrate. New city, new identity, a modest stipend to start again. You would be safe, but you would always be looking over your shoulder. And Nathan Sykes would continue to be what he is, doing this to other women, perhaps learning from his mistakes with you. Running again. Hiding, waiting for the next shadow. The thought made something inside her curl in weariness. Always looking back. Was that a life? The second option, he said, his voice dropping a degree, is to remove the problem at its source. Sabrina's breath caught. Remove? You mean? I mean using the law, he clarified, though his tone suggested the law was just one tool among many. Your testimony, combined with strategic evidence, could put Nathan Sykes away for a very long time, not just for what he did to you, but for his other enterprises. The information you wrote down is a starting point. With the right pressure applied to the right people, his little empire of fear would collapse. He paused, watching her closely. It would require you to stand up, to be visible, to face him. It is the harder path, but it is the only one that offers a permanent solution, not just for you, but potentially for others. The choice was staggering. Hide or fight back in the most public, terrifying way imaginable. She would be fighting with Ricardo Farina, a man whose methods and motives remained a mystery. Why would you do that? She whispered. Go to war with someone over me? You called him a gnat. This seems like a lot of effort for a gnat. For the first time, a genuine, though faint smile touched his lips. It is not effort. It is pruning. And as I said, your story interests me. I find waste distasteful. The waste of a life, of potential. He gestured slightly to her to the room. You have a mind. You have courage. It was buried, but it is there. Watching someone like Sykes try to extinguish that is an annoyance. He stood up and walked to the window. The choice is yours, Sabrina. Asylum or justice. Think about it. You have 24 hours. He turned back to her, his gaze direct. But know this. Whichever you choose, you are under my protection for its duration. Sykes cannot touch you here. My word on that. His word. It was his only currency, and for reasons she couldn't name, she believed it. She stood unsteady. Thank you. I'll think about it. As she reached the door, his voice stopped her. Sabrina. She turned. He was still at the window, backlit by the sun, his face in shadow. The clothes. Do they fit? The mundane question after everything threw her. Yes, perfectly. Good. He nodded, a small, satisfied gesture. Aldo will show you to the library if you wish to read, or the garden. The day is yours. She left the study, her mind a whirlwind. Asylum or justice, with a man who pruned gnats and disliked waste. She walked past a large mirror in the hallway and stopped, taking in her reflection. The silk blouse, tailored trousers, the eyes that still held shadows, but now, a new, fierce spark of consideration. She looked like a different woman. She felt like a different woman. The woman in the diner, drowning in a borrowed sweater, would have chosen asylum without hesitation. The woman in the mirror wasn't sure if she could live with being small, hidden, unremarkable ever again. Of leather and parchment. Floor-to-ceiling shelves held books in multiple languages, their spines a tapestry of color and gilt lettering. Sabrina wandered the aisles, her fingers trailing over the worn leather, not seeing the titles. Her mind was a locked room with 2 doors, and she stood paralyzed between them. Asylum, a clean break, a bus ticket to somewhere anonymous, a small apartment, a job under a new name, the constant low-grade hum of fear. Nathan or someone like him might one day recognize her on the street. It was a life defined not by what she wanted, but by what she was running from. Justice, Courtrooms, lawyers, Nathan's venomous stare across a room, having to relive every humiliation, every moment of terror, under cross-examination, the possibility of him walking free, angrier, more dangerous than ever, but also the chance to see him handcuffed, to use her voice not just to escape, but to dismantle the prison he'd built for her and likely others. She sat in the armchair by the window as the sun warmed the room. The choice felt immense. Underneath was Ricardo Farina, his protection absolute, but tinged with obligation and questions. There was always a price. The day passed in a strange, suspended animation. She ate a light lunch brought to her in the library. She tried to read a novel, but the words blurred. She returned to the garden, walking its precise paths until her legs ached. The walls, for all their beauty, began to feel closer. As evening drew in, casting long shadows across the gravel, she made her decision. It wasn't a thunderclap of courage, but a quiet, steady settling in her bones. Running had been her first, desperate act to save her life. Staying hidden would mean letting that act define the rest. Nathan had taken 3 years from her. He didn't get to dictate the next 30. She needed to tell Ricardo. But when she inquired with Aldo, she was told, "Mr. Farina is engaged in a meeting. He will be unavailable until later this evening." Frustration, mixed with a pinch of relief at the reprieve, simmered within her. She was summoned to a formal dining room for dinner, expecting to eat alone again, but as she entered, she saw Ricardo already seated at the head of a long, polished table. He stood as she entered, a gesture of old-world courtesy that felt incongruous. "Sabrina, please join me." He pulled out the chair to his right. The meal was another exquisite, silent affair for the first few courses, a delicate soup, then seared scallops. The only sounds were the soft clink of silverware and the occasional murmur from the server. The tension was a live wire between them. Finally, as a palate-cleansing sorbet was served, Sabrina spoke. "I've made my decision." Ricardo looked at her, setting his spoon down. "I am listening." "I want the second option. Justice. I want to try." The words, once spoken, felt real and terrifying. He gave a slow, single nod. "A harder road, but a complete one." He didn't look surprised. "It will require your full commitment. You will need to be prepared, to be coached. The legal system is a battlefield, and Nathan Sykes, for all his lack of sophistication, will fight dirty. He will try to discredit you, intimidate you, exhaust you. I understand. Do you?" His gaze was intense. "He will hire lawyers who will ask you why you didn't leave sooner, why you stayed after the first slap. They will dissect your life, your past, your mental state. They will paint you as unstable, complicit, a scorned woman. Are you prepared for that?" A cold knot formed in her stomach, but she held his gaze. "I lived through the reality. I can live through the questions." A flicker of something, respect perhaps, crossed his face. "Very well. Then we begin tomorrow. My legal team will meet with you. They are the best, discreet, aggressive, and utterly loyal. You will tell them everything, even the things you are ashamed of. There can be no surprises." "Your legal team," she repeated. "Ricardo, I can't possibly afford—" "You are not paying?" he interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. "This is my undertaking. Consider it an investment in civic pruning." "And what is the return on your investment?" The question burst out of her, sharp with all her pent-up suspicion. He was silent for a long moment, his fingers tracing the stem of his wine glass. "Satisfaction," he said at last, his voice low. "And perhaps the answer to a question of my own. I want to see whether, given the tools and freedom I can provide, someone can truly reclaim what's been taken from them, or if the scars run too deep. The outcome matters to me as more than a legal victory. It's a test of whether my interventions make a lasting difference." "What question? What becomes of a flame that has been smothered when you finally remove the bell jar?" He looked at her, and for a fleeting second, the calculating mask slipped, revealing something more complex, a genuine, profound curiosity, but also a hint of personal stake. "I want to see if it gutters out, or if it grows to burn down the house that tried to contain it. I need to know if my actions can help restore what was lost. Not just to you, but as a challenge to myself." The metaphor was stark, beautiful, and frightening. She was his experiment, his fascinating, volatile specimen. The realization should have made her recoil, but instead it sparked a deep defiance within her. Fine. Let him watch. She would burn so brightly he'd need to shield his eyes. Tomorrow, then, she said, her voice steady. Tomorrow. He raised his glass slightly in a silent toast. To justice! She picked up her water glass and touched it to his. The crystal rang with a pure, clear note. Later in her suite, Sabrina couldn't sleep. The decision was made, the path chosen. The fear was still there, a cold companion, but it was now joined by a new, unfamiliar sensation, purpose. She was no longer just fleeing. She was moving toward something. A soft knock at her sitting room door made her jump. It was Aldo. Miss Sabrina, Mr. Farina, asked that you have this. He handed her a small velvet box. He said you may find it useful. Puzzled, she took it. Aldo gave a slight bow and retreated. She opened the box. Inside, nestled on black silk, was not jewelry, but a sleek, minimalist smartphone. It was black, unmarked. A note, written in a precise masculine hand, lay underneath. A tool, not a tracker. A secure line. My number, Aldo's, and the lead attorneys are pre-programmed. The rest is for you to decide. Use it to rebuild your world, not to hide from it. RF? She powered it on. The screen glowed to life, prompting her to enter her biometric data. She set it up with her fingerprint and a passcode only she would know. The contacts list held 3 entries. R, Aldo, Valentina Rossi, Esquiman, and she stared at it. This symbol of regained autonomy, given by the man who held all the power in her current existence. It was a gesture of staggering complexity, both an act of genuine trust and a reminder of the gulf between them. He was giving her a voice, but the network it operated on was entirely his. She clutched the phone to her chest, a lifeline and a tether, and finally, sleep came. Downstairs, Ricardo was in his study, a secure video call open on his laptop. On the screen was a severe, elegant woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and perfectly coiffed silver hair. Valentina Rossi. The client is ready? Valentina asked, her voice crisp. She has chosen to proceed, Ricardo confirmed. And her state of mind? Resolute, intelligent, traumatized, but not broken. She will require careful handling, but she will not break on the stand. Valentina made a note. And the opposing party? This Sykes. A blunt instrument. But do not underestimate his capacity for spite. He will use every low tactic available. We will need to be prepared to counter not just legally, but otherwise. Understood. Valentina's gaze was direct. Ricardo, this is an unusual diversion for you. The resources required are not insignificant for what is, essentially, a neighborhood pest control issue. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Even a palace can have a termite problem, Valentina. It is not the size of the pest, but the damage it does to the foundation that matters. Consider this, preventative maintenance for the ecosystem. Valentina's expression softened a fraction. She had known him since he was a defiant teenager trying to drag his family's name into the light. She understood the language he didn't speak aloud. I'll be there at 9 a.m. We'll begin the deposition. The call ended. Ricardo leaned back in his chair, his eyes on the monitor that showed the quiet hallway outside Sabrina's suite. The warm blob of light was still, finally at rest. He thought of her in the diner, all trembling courage and desperate calculation. He thought of the folded note, the meticulous, trapped detail, the choice she had just made. Pruning, he had called it. But as he sat in the silent study, he admitted to himself it was more than that. It was an experiment, as much as a restoration. He wanted to believe his power could repair as well as control. Against all his hardened instincts, he found he cared about the outcome. Not just for Sabrina's sake, but to prove to himself that intervention could undo some of the world's damage, that he could be more than a manipulator. At precisely 9 a.m., Valentina Rossi arrived. She was a force of nature in a tailored navy suit, her handshake firm and her assessment immediate. She took over a sun-drenched conference room on the first floor, transforming it into a war room. Files appeared, a paralegal set up a laptop, and a sense of fierce, focused energy crackled in the air. Sabrina, wearing another set of perfectly fitting clothes, a simple black dress that felt like armor, sat across from Valentina, her hands clasped tightly. "Sabrina," Valentina began, her voice surprisingly gentle despite its precision. "My job is to build a case so solid that Nathan Sykes cannot wiggle out of it. To do that, I need to know everything. Not just the facts, but the context, the emotions, the patterns. I need you to take me back to the very beginning and walk me through it, step by step. We will go slowly. We will stop when you need to. This is not a courtroom. This is the foundation. Do you understand?" Sabrina nodded, taking a deep breath. "I understand." And so she began again. But this time, fear mingled with relief as Valentina's meticulous questioning led her deeper. The story deepened, widened. Dates were pinned down. Specific insults were recalled. The pattern of financial control was detailed. How he'd made her quit her job. Then doled out allowances. How he'd run up debt in her name. Valentina's paralegal took notes. Her face a mask of professional neutrality, though her eyes occasionally flashed with anger and compassion. They broke for lunch, but the work didn't stop. Valentina questioned her about the physical incidents, not shying away from the details Sabrina had tried to bury. The time he'd shoved her into the kitchen counter, leaving a bruise on her hip. She'd hidden with loose clothing. The night he'd backhanded her for talking back, splitting her lip. The accidental trip down the stairs had sprained her wrist. For each, Valentina asked, "Was there a witness? Did you take photos? Did you seek medical attention?" The answer was almost always no. Shame flickered in Sabrina's eyes. Nathan had been careful. The isolation was complete. "He was smart in a cruel small way," Valentina mused, making a note. "He created a closed system. No witnesses, no paper trail of abuse. Just the constant grinding threat." She looked at Sabrina. "But he made one mistake. He underestimated you. He didn't think you had the capacity to leave the phone. That act, Sabrina, is the crack in his armor. It proves premeditation, a clear will to escape his control. It's powerful." In the afternoon, they moved to Sabrina's list. Valentina's team cross-referenced names. Marcus, the bookkeeper, Nathan mentioned skimming from the top. And a shipment log? Yes, he was on the phone. He thought I was in the shower. Said, "Marcus better have those numbers fixed before Tuesday, or he'll be swimming with the cargo." Valentina met her paralegal's eyes. "That's tax fraud and a threat. We can use it. This is leverage to get someone to testify against Nathan, maybe for leniency." The day was exhausting, emotionally brutal. By 5 p.m., Sabrina felt scraped raw. Every hidden wound opened and examined under a bright light. But she also felt a strange, burgeoning strength. Relief mingled with terror. Giving voice to the secrets, speaking the unspeakable to this sharp, capable woman who listened and believed, was its own kind of exorcism. As they wrapped up, Valentina placed a hand on her arm. "You did exceptionally well today. This is the hardest part, the living through it again. But you are building the walls of his prison with your own words. Remember that." Sabrina could only nod, emotionally spent, her exhaustion edging into numbness as a faint sense of hope flickered beneath. Valentina packed her briefcase. "Rest tonight. We continue tomorrow. We'll start drafting the official complaint and explore protective orders." She paused at the door. "Ricardo was right. You have a formidable memory. It will serve you well." After Valentina left, Sabrina retreated to the garden, needing air that wasn't thick with the ghosts of her past. She walked the paths, the new phone heavy in her pocket. Longing for connection gnawed at her chest, but so did fear. The urge to use it, to reach out to someone from her old life, was strong. But who? Her sister, whom she hadn't spoken to in over a year because Nathan had poisoned that well? An old friend who had probably given up on her? The shame was a barrier as real as the garden walls. Pressing close, mingled with a hopeless yearning. The sessions were productive. Ricardo's voice came from behind her. He stood on the terrace, having changed into dark trousers and a simple black sweater. He looked less like a corporate titan and more like a watchful guardian, though the power still radiated from him. "Exhausting," she said, turning to him. "But yes, Valentina is intense. The best always are." He descended the few steps into the garden, joining her on the path. She sees the architecture of a case. The weak points, the load-bearing walls. You are in capable hands. They walked in silence for a moment, the crunch of gravel under their feet the only sound. She said my leaving the phone was a mistake on his part, that it helps the case. "It was his fatal flaw," Ricardo said. "Men like him believe their control is absolute. They cannot conceive of the controlled object having a will of its own. Your act of defiance was, in his worldview, an impossibility. Therefore, he did not plan for it. And in conflict, the unplanned-for variable is what wins or loses wars. She looked at him. This man who spoke of emotional abuse in terms of military strategy. Is that how you see everything? As a conflict? A series of moves and countermoves? It is how the world works, he said simply. The rules are merely more explicit in some arenas than others. Nathan Sykes's rules were fear and isolation. Yours now are truth and law. The battlefield has changed, but it is still a battlefield. And your rules, Ricardo? She asked, daring. He stopped walking, looking at her. The fading evening light casting his face in planes of shadow and gold. My rules are older, he said, his voice low. Loyalty, respect, an eye for an eye. And the protection of what is under my roof. He held her gaze. You asked me my motive. There it is. You came under my roof. You asked for my help. That creates a responsibility. In my world, that bond is absolute. It was the most direct answer he had given. It spoke of a code that was both brutal and strangely honorable. She understood then that his protection wasn't a whim or an experiment alone. It was a point of honor. She was a responsibility he had chosen to assume. The weight of that was immense. Thank you, she said, voice thin. He nodded, accepting them. Come. Aldo tells me you picked at your lunch. Dinner is ready. You need your strength. The days ahead will require it. That night, after another quiet meal during which they spoke of neutral things, the garden, a book in the library, Sabrina returned to her suite. The new phone felt like a talisman. She scrolled through the empty contacts list. Then, with a determined breath, she typed in a number from memory. Her sister, Claire. She sent a text. It felt safer. Claire, it's Sabrina. I'm safe. I'm so sorry for everything. I've left him for good. I can't explain everything now, but I'm getting help. I just wanted you to know I'm okay, and that I love you. She stared at the screen for a full minute, then hit send. The message whooshed away into the ether. Almost immediately, 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Her heart hammered. Finally, a reply came. Sabrina, oh my God, are you really safe? Where are you? Do you need anything? I've been so worried. I love you too. Tears, hot and sudden, spilt down Sabrina's cheeks. The connection, however fragile, was still there. She hadn't burned that bridge entirely. I'm safe. I'm with people who are helping me. I can't say more yet, but I'm okay. I'll explain when I can. Promise. Just be safe. Call me when you can, anytime. Sabrina clutched the phone to her chest, a sob of relief and grief shaking her shoulders. Hope and longing swirled inside her. It was a small thread, but it was a thread back to the world, to a self that existed before Nathan. It was a beginning. Downstairs, Ricardo received a notification on his own device. A security alert flagged on Sabrina's new phone. An outgoing text to a known relative. He read the transcript, saw the exchange. He did not intervene. He simply noted it, a small, approving nod in the darkness of his study. The flame wasn't just burning against her enemy. It was beginning to reach out, to reconnect. The experiment was progressing. He had a second screen open, a live feed from a camera pointed at a shabby apartment building across town. Nathan Sykes's place. A car had pulled up. 2 of Sykes's men were loading boxes into the trunk. They looked agitated. The gnat was buzzing, mobilizing. The hunt was moving from confusion to active aggression. Ricardo picked up his secure line. Aldo, increase the detail on the perimeter. Double the shifts. I want a radius of 10 blocks monitored for any familiar faces. The gnat is preparing to sting. The game was advancing. And Sabrina, in her room, holding a phone that held a thread of love, had no idea how close the swarm was getting. The morning dawned gray and drizzly. The legal war room felt even more intense on the second day. Valentina, armed with the previous day's notes, shifted from gathering Sabrina's testimony to constructing the legal attack. We're filing for an emergency protective order today, Valentina stated, placing a draft document before Sabrina. It will prohibit Sykes from contacting, approaching, or harassing you. Given the history of violence and your current status as a guest in a secure location, the judge should grant it ex parte, without him present. It's a piece of paper, but it's a start. It establishes a legal record of his threat. Sabrina scanned the document. seeing her fears translated into cold, formal language. Respondent did knowingly cause bodily injury to petitioner. Petitioner's reasonable fear for her, physical safety. It was both validating and surreal. Will it stop him? Sabrina asked quietly. A man like him? Probably not directly, Valentina said, not sugarcoating it. But it gives the police a reason to arrest him on sight if he violates it. And more importantly, it shows the court that his behavior is an ongoing pattern, which will be crucial for the criminal case we are building alongside this. Valentina tapped the list of Nathan's associates as she spoke. Our next move is to apply pressure here. We start with the bookkeeper, Marcus. He has the most to lose and is likely the most frightened. Ricardo's people are already making discreet inquiries. Ricardo's people? The thought sent a chill through Sabrina. What does making inquiries mean? Valentina met her gaze levelly. It means offering Marcus a choice. He can speak to us voluntarily, providing information on Sykes' financial crimes and receive certain considerations regarding his own legal exposure. Or he can wait for the IRS and the Organized Crime Task Force to come knocking, with no offer of protection from his employer, who will likely throw him to the wolves to save himself. She leaned forward. Sabrina, Nathan Sykes' world is held together by fear. We must weaponize that same fear. We make his allies more afraid of us than they are of him. Ruthless, pragmatic. It left Sabrina feeling complicit, and a low shame flickered beneath her bruises. But she remembered the protective order, the memory of her lips splitting beneath Nathan's hand. She forced herself to set aside the feeling. Okay. The morning was spent rehearsing her affidavit for the protective order, ensuring every statement was precise and backed by the details she'd provided. Valentina was a drill sergeant, challenging her on every point, forcing her to be unshakably clear. He will have lawyers who will try to pick this apart. Your story must be a fortress. No cracks. Just before lunch, Aldo appeared at the door, his expression grave. He gestured to Valentina, who nodded and excused herself to join him. They spoke in hushed tones in the hallway. When Valentina returned, her professional composure was intact, but her eyes were harder. There's been a development, she said, closing the door. Nathan Sykes has retained counsel, a firm called Dern & Coyle. Sabrina frowned. The name meant nothing to her. They are aggressive, Valentina said, choosing her words carefully. They specialize in defending clients with significant assets and significant problems. Their tactics are often theatrical. They attack the victim's character relentlessly. This means Sykes is taking this seriously. He's spending real money. He's not just sending Leo to drag you back. He's preparing for a legal fight. Sabrina felt a flare of dread. Nathan was adapting, learning. The gnat was growing fangs, muscling into her nightmares. So what does that change? Sabrina asked. It means we move faster. The protective order gets filed this afternoon, and we need to accelerate our pressure on Marcus. We need a crack in Sykes' armor before Dern & Coyle can build a wall around him. Valentina looked at her. Are you ready for this to become public? Once we file, your name will be on a document in a courthouse. It's a risk. Sabrina thought of the text from her sister, the thread of connection. She thought of the word justice she had chosen. I'm ready. The afternoon was a blur of final signatures and a tense, silent car ride, with Aldo and a new, silent driver, taking Sabrina to the courthouse. Sabrina didn't go in. Valentina entered the building, carrying the documents in her briefcase. Sabrina waited in the back of the tinted window sedan, parked in a secure underground garage, feeling like a fugitive. 40 minutes later, Valentina returned, a thin, determined smile on her lips. Granted, full protective order. The judge was persuaded. She handed Sabrina a copy. It's served. He knows. He knows. The words thudded in her chest. Sabrina pictured Nathan reading the order. Her name, her accusation, a legal line he'd never let stand. The threat felt suddenly more personal, a declaration of war she had signed in her own hand. When they returned to the house, the atmosphere had shifted. Aldo met them at the door, his usual calm replaced by a focused alertness. Mr. Farina is in the security suite. He requests you both join him. The security suite was a room Sabrina hadn't seen, hidden behind a bookcase in the study. When she entered, she saw cool light and glowing monitors around the room. Ricardo stood before a large screen, arms crossed. On it were multiple video feeds, street views, the front gate, the back perimeter. He's reacting, Ricardo said without preamble, his voice a low vibration. He pointed to a feed showing a nondescript sedan parked 3 blocks down from the main gate. That vehicle has been stationary for 90 minutes. 2 occupants. They are not police. They are watching. Sabrina's mouth went dry. His? Almost certainly. He is probing. Testing our defenses. Ricardo turned to her, his gray eyes like polished stone. The protective order is a legal victory, but it has also raised the stakes. He now understands you are not just hiding, you are fighting back with formidable allies. This makes him more dangerous, not less. Valentina stepped forward and examined the feeds. We need Marcus. Now. We need something to hit him with before he decides legal channels are too slow. Ricardo gave a single, sharp nod. It is being arranged. Tonight. He looked at Sabrina. You should remain in the central part of the house, away from the windows in your suite, until we have a better assessment. The directive was calm, but it felt like a lockdown. The fortress was now a bunker. Dinner was tense and quiet in a breakfast nook near the kitchen, away from the walls. Ricardo joined them, splitting his focus between his phone and the hallway. Sabrina picked at her food, appetite gone. Finally, she broke the silence. What happens tonight? Ricardo looked up from his phone. A conversation, to see if Marcus values his freedom or his loyalty to a man who would sacrifice him without a second thought. And if he doesn't value his freedom enough? Then we find another pressure point. Ricardo's tone left no doubt that we meant him and his methods. But Marcus is an accountant. He deals in numbers, not violence. He will understand risk-reward analysis. After dinner, Aldo effectively escorted Sabrina to her suite. For your safety, miss, he said, his tone allowing no argument. The garden doors were locked from the outside. She was back in the glass cage, but now she could see the shadows moving outside it. She tried to read, but every creak morphed into imagined threats. Was it Nathan's men? Ricardo's? Anxiety curled hot in her stomach. The television's chatter barely numbed her nerves as she jumped at the elevator's hum, struggling to carve out a sliver of normalcy. Shortly past 11, her new phone buzzed. A message from R. The conversation was productive. Marcus has agreed to a meeting with Valentina tomorrow. He is bringing records. Sleep. The perimeter is secure. Productive. The word rang hollow. What kind of conversation twists a frightened man overnight? What did Ricardo say, or do? Sabrina's fears expanded to fill the unknown. Still, the result was tangible. A fissure in Nathan's dominance. A crack where hope could bleed through. She replied, her fingers trembling slightly. Thank you. His response was immediate. You chose justice. This is what it looks like. It is not a clean process. Rest. Sabrina put the phone down and walked to the window, pulling back the edge of the heavy curtain. The garden was dark, illuminated only by small, low-path lights. She could see nothing beyond the high walls, but she knew they were out there, Ricardo's men and Nathan's. A silent, invisible war is being waged in the damp night over her fate. She thought of Marcus, the bookkeeper with the nervous eyes she'd seen once when he came to the apartment. He'd avoided looking at her. He'd known. They'd all known. And now, the fear Nathan had used to glue his world together was being turned against him. Sabrina let the curtain drop. Triumph felt distant. She felt awash in sorrow, exhausted, unmistakably changed. This path was not rescue but warfare. She realized, with a shiver, she was no longer passive in this battle. She was a live piece, dangerously aware, forced to move by masters like Valentina and Ricardo. She got into bed, staring at the ceiling. The flame, once smothered, was now part of a controlled burn, and she could only hope that when the fire died down, something better would be left standing in the ashes. Outside, in the watching sedan 3 blocks away, a man spoke into a phone. Nothing. Place is locked up tight, like a vault. You want us to stay? The voice on the other end, Nathan Sykes, was brittle with fury. Yeah, you stay. She's in there. And that suit-wearing prick is hiding her. We'll see how vault-tight it is when we find the right key. The meeting with Marcus was held in a neutral, anonymous office downtown. owned by one of Ricardo's holding companies. Sabrina did not attend. She waited at the house, pacing the library, jumping at every phone chime. Valentina returned just after 2 p.m., her expression grim with satisfaction. She found Sabrina in the garden, bundled in a cashmere blanket against the damp chill. "He cracked," Valentina said without preamble, sitting beside her on a stone bench. "He brought spreadsheets, bank transfers, and ledger entries. Nathan has been skimming from his own partners for years, falsifying shipment manifests, evading taxes on a significant scale. More importantly, Marcus kept a private log of notes of conversations. He was covering his own back, jotting down details after each encounter. In one entry, Nathan explicitly instructs him to hide money related to the incident with the girl at the Odyssey. That's his strip club. The note implies an assault payout being hushed up. Sabrina wrapped the blanket tighter. So he'll testify? He's testifying for immunity from his financial crimes. He fears Nathan, but fears prison more. We have him." Valentina squeezed Sabrina's arm. "This is big, Sabrina. Now it's not just he said, she said. We have a pattern, a witness, and proof. Dern and Coyle attacking your credibility just got tougher." Relief hit Sabrina like a wave, warm, shaky, overwhelming. At last, it was working. The first domino had fallen. She pressed her hands together, hope and fear colliding in her chest. What now? "We go to the DA with your statement, the protective order, and Marcus's evidence. We push for a grand jury, assault, imprisonment, intimidation, racketeering. We hit Nathan Sykes with everything at once. He won't see it coming." Valentina's eyes gleamed. When Valentina left, Sabrina stayed in the garden, barely breathing as the news settled over her. For the first time, everything felt real. Nathan wasn't a monster, just a cornered thug, his empire rotting from within. The fear he had cultivated in her was now eating through him instead. Ricardo found her there later, as the afternoon light began to fail. He carried 2 glasses of something amber. He handed one to her. A small toast, to a successful first engagement. She took the glass, the crystal cold in her hand. "Valentina told me. Thank you." "Don't thank me. Thank Marcus's instincts. The battle isn't won. Sykes will be indicted, arrested, make bail. Then he'll be most dangerous. A cornered animal." The image dampened her flicker of triumph. "What do we do?" "We reinforce the house and build our case. Valentina's targeting your list. The cop, the shipping manager. We bring them in or bury him. For months, expect depositions, meetings, waiting. Be patient. Be visible." Visible. That was the opposite of everything she'd done for 3 years. Justice must be seen. Hiding suggests shame. You have none. Walk in with your head high. That sends a message to him, others, and you. You're not a secret. You're a fact. His words resonated in places she thought dead. Years spent erasing herself, shrinking, not provoking. The idea of walking toward the confrontation, openly, set her heart thumping with terror and something brighter, brittle, and alive. It was the final, terrifying act of reclaiming herself. "I understand," she said, and for the first time she felt she truly did. The following week was a whirlwind of quiet activity. Sabrina worked daily with Valentina, refining her testimony, learning about court procedure. The case was presented to a senior ADA, a no-nonsense woman named Claudia Hayes, who reviewed the package with a keen eye and agreed to convene a grand jury. Through it all, the surveillance on the house continued. The sedan came and went. Once, a delivery van parked nearby for hours, its occupants never making a delivery. Ricardo's security team documented everything, a silent, watchful counter-presence. Sabrina used her phone. She called her sister Claire, their conversations initially stilted, then flowing into tearful, healing exchanges. Claire wanted to come, but Sabrina, following Valentina's advice, asked her to wait. "It's not safe yet," she explained, and Claire, though worried, understood. One evening, after a particularly grueling session going over the timeline of financial abuse, Sabrina felt claustrophobic. The house, for all its space, felt like it was pressing in. She asked Aldo if she could walk the inner perimeter of the garden after dark, with an escort. He agreed, assigning a quiet, professional man named Matteo to serve as her escort. They walked in silence around the garden for a lap, the night air crisp. On the second lap, Matteo's hand went to his ear when he listened to a sub-vocalized command through his earpiece. His posture stiffened as he received instructions. "Miss Sabrina, we should go inside now," he said, his voice calm but urgent. "What is it?" "Motion sensor on the eastern wall. Likely an animal, but protocol. Inside." He gently guided her in. As they reached the steps, a sharp crack echoed in the night, followed by the tinkling shatter of glass high above them. Matteo didn't hesitate. He wrapped an arm around Sabrina and half-carried, half-shoved her through the door into the breakfast nook, following and locking it behind them. "Stay down," he ordered, his body between her and the window, his hand on the weapon at his hip. Her heart was a frantic drum against her ribs. Was that a gunshot? Someone threw something, a brick likely. "Stay here." He spoke into his mic. "Breach east wall. Projectile, upper window. No subject. Lockdown." Within seconds, the house transformed. A low, pulsing alarm hummed through the walls. Doors could be heard locking automatically. Aldo appeared, his face granite. "Miss Sabrina, come with me. To the safe room." "Ricardo," she started, "is aware he is secure, please." He led her not to her suite, but to a panel in the study she hadn't noticed. It slid open to reveal a steep staircase leading down. The safe room was a small, reinforced space with monitors, communications equipment, bottled water, and a bench. It felt like a tomb. "I'll be outside," Aldo said, and the heavy door sealed with a hydraulic hiss. Alone, Sabrina watched the monitors. They showed various angles of the grounds, all in night vision green. Figures moved with practiced efficiency, Ricardo's security team fanning out. There was no panic, only a methodical response. On one screen, she saw Ricardo himself, standing in the security suite, watching the feeds, his expression carved from ice. He was speaking, issuing commands. It lasted 20 minutes. Then, the all clear. Aldo opened the door. "The perimeter has been searched. We found the brick. It had a message." Sabrina followed him back to the study. Ricardo was there, holding a clear evidence bag. Inside was a rough chunk of concrete block. Wrapped around it was a piece of paper. He held it up for her to see, his face unreadable. Scrawled in what looked like lipstick or paint were the words, "I own you." Nathan's voice in her head was as clear as if he were in the room. Her blood turned to ice. Ricardo's voice was low and dangerous. "A line's been crossed. This isn't legal anymore. It's a direct challenge." He handed the bag to Aldo. "Have it processed. Check all exterior cameras from the last hour. I want the face of whoever threw this. I want to know how they got that close." He turned to Sabrina, voice fierce. "You're safe. He won't get in. But this changes everything. He thinks he can reach you. He must learn otherwise, now." For the first time, Sabrina saw Ricardo's truth. Not a benefactor, not a strategist, but a mafia boss. Terror and awe tangled inside her. In that instant, she knew, Nathan Sykes had made the gravest error of his life. He hadn't merely attacked, he'd trespassed, and in Ricardo's world, that demanded retribution beyond the law. "What are you going to do?" she asked, her voice small. He stepped closer, and for a brief moment, his hand came up, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't felt fall on her cheek. The gesture was shockingly gentle, at odds with the fury in his eyes. "Whatever's needed," he said. "Sleep, Sabrina. The walls are higher tonight." He left the study, Aldo in his shadow. Sabrina stood motionless, the warmth of Ricardo's brief touch vanishing into the cold echo of shattered glass. Every sense rang with fear and inevitability. The path ahead had darkened. She felt the flame inside her move from shelter to forge, tested, transformed, unbearably hot.